週一長談，我哋翻嚟繼續同我哋前任財政廳長、衛生廳長同埋經濟發展廳廳長 Mr. Colin Hansen 嚟傾下最近卑詩省同 Alberta 省為咗一條嘅油管造成嘅兩省嘅戰爭。Welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, let's go back to the gas. It's all about energy. Recently, British Columbia, Lower Mainland has spiked to the historical height on our gas price. And a lot of dispute and spit war saying that it's the result of the trade war between the Alberta and British Columbia. But we have our gas price go up and down. This recent historical height and our gas price, does it really have to do with this pipeline?
Well, it does to a certain extent, because what really drives gas prices in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia is the refining capacity. So a lot of our gasoline that we put into our cars comes from the refineries in Washington State, just south of the border. And they actually, interestingly, about 400 to 500 oil tankers a year come in through the Strait of Juan de Fuca, bringing Alaska crude oil into those refineries in Washington State. And then it's refined, and the gasoline that is a product from those refineries, some of that comes up to Canada. And then the other gasoline comes from the refinery that's based in Burnaby that is fed by the the existing Trans Mountain pipeline. So when there's shortage of capacity, in the case of the refineries in the US, they're going through some overhaul, some refits, so there is diminished production. And then there's also production issues in Burnaby, which drive up the price of gas. It's shortage of supply. So where the Trans Mountain pipeline comes in is that by having more capacity to bring gasoline or other oil products to British Columbia from the Alberta refineries will mean that that would increase supply available in Greater Vancouver and bring the price of gasoline down lower than it otherwise would have been.
So the current spike has nothing to do with the current dispute. It's just something that has correlationship, but not a cost effect at this point.
In a direct sense, that's true, yes.
Yeah, but then the Alberta Notley Premier, she said, we will, if this dispute is not solved soon, she has the right to turn the pipe, turn it off.
Yes.
Can she do that?
Well, there's a significant amount of gasoline that does come into British Columbia from Alberta. And it would be complex. I understand they would have to pass legislation to give themselves the power to do that. But it was threatened back in the 1970s when there was an energy dispute, oil dispute between Alberta and the federal government. And, you know, when we look at these kind of trade disputes, nobody wins. Everybody loses. So it's, I think it's sad to see governments making these kinds of threats to damage the economy of their neighboring jurisdiction. And, you know, I felt that way when British Columbia made these threats against the pipeline and, you know, said they would do things to put blockades up and to frustrate the construction. I believe that's irresponsible. And I also think that it's irresponsible for another premier to threaten to cut off things that would damage British Columbia's economy. Nobody wins that. We're Canadians. We should be Canadians first, and we should make sure that we look after the overall best interests of the Canadian economy.
Talking about this trade relations that nobody will benefit, the trade between Alberta and BC is right now roughly balanced. And the most recent data available says that in Alberta export to BC were worth about $16.75 billion. So during your tenure as the Economic Development and Finance Minister, all these mechanisms that develop, for instance, there is an organization called New West Partnership Agreement. So all these mechanisms, is there anything that can help to solve this dispute?
Well, I think, first of all, the more we can break down trade barriers, whether those are international trade barriers between Canada and China, or Canada and the United States, or whether it's trade barriers between provinces, the more we can break down those barriers, the better off our economy will be, the better off our standard of living will be as individuals. And so in 2006, when I was Minister of Economic Development, on behalf of the provincial government, I signed the so-called free trade agreement between British Columbia and Alberta. At the time, it was called the Trade and TILMA, the Trade Investment Labor Mobility Agreement between BC and Alberta, to break down those barriers. The economies both benefited from that. It was then extended to include Saskatchewan and more recently Manitoba, and was renamed the New West Partnership Agreement. So that is to make sure that we have more of a coordinated, a harmonized regulatory structure that makes it easier to do business, which it is. You know, I think as much as we see all of these things happening today, Canada is a great place for international investors to come to. British Columbia is a great place for international investors to come to. And I think we have to make sure that we make sure that that's as good as it can possibly be to encourage that investment to come in. And unfortunately, some of these interprovincial trade disputes do exactly the opposite. They undermine the reputation that we have as a great place to invest. So I think that, again, the provincial government, the NDP government is, I think, is playing fast and loose with British Columbia's reputation as a good place for investment.
So currently you are the CEO of Advantage BC, which is to encourage the foreign investments. Do you see this trade dispute hurts this effort?
Yes, I think that when you see the provincial government fighting with the federal government or fighting with a neighboring province, I think that does undermine our reputation. But if you look at the fundamentals, we've got so many things going, whether it's attracting investment into new technologies, clean energy, into the resource sector, whether it's mining operations or forestry or agriculture. There's tremendous opportunities here in British Columbia, and we need to do a better job to make sure that we attract even more international investment so that we can have that economic growth here for the benefit of all.
It seems that the LNG is kind of, everyone is revisiting it, and it's kind of revived again. So how is this LNG fit into this the clean energy and also the environmental and economic development disputes?
Well, I think that LNG is a great opportunity for the world to reduce CO2 emissions. So in China, I think that the government of China has done a tremendous job over the last 5 years of reducing coal consumption of the thermal coal. There's two types of coal, of course. There's metallurgical coal, which is what BC produces and exports. That's used in steel making, and it has a lower CO2 emissions than thermal coal. But China consumes huge amounts of thermal coal, a lot of it coming from Australia, to generate electricity. So if you switch those power plants over from using thermal coal to using natural gas, it has a dramatically lower CO2 emissions for every kilowatt of electricity that is produced. So China can reduce its CO2 emissions by simply switching from thermal coal to LNG. And in British Columbia, we have huge volumes of natural gas that is available for export. Now, some people, the environmentalists will say, or the hard environmentalists will say, just cut out all fossil fuels and cut it out tomorrow. Don't ship our oil, don't ship our natural gas. Well, guess what? Countries like China are just going to buy their oil and their natural gas from other countries, like Venezuela, for example, or from the Middle East. And Canada is a reliable supplier, it's a stable government, and we can help China reduce CO2 emissions by exporting our natural gas to China and other jurisdictions around the world as well. So, we see good support from our First Nations communities around British Columbia that want to see LNG exports. It means jobs for them in their community. It means revenues in the long term that will allow those communities to have more economic independence and stability as well.
And it seems that the LNG market has been very fluctuated in the past few years, and it's just in the past couple of years it was down, and now it's up again. So everyone is talking about LNG and again.
Yes, so I think that LNG, the worldwide demand for LNG is growing quite significantly, and it's because it is a much more environmentally friendly fuel than coal or oil. So it's where it can be that shift can be made, that's going to improve the environment of the planet. In the long term, we have to get off fossil fuels. There's no question.
Yeah.
We have to find other ways, but that's going to be decades and decades before we can get there. It has to be a goal. We have to work towards it, finding alternate forms of energy. But in the meantime, LNG plays a huge role internationally.
Yeah, the reason why I come back to LNG is because the Premier Notley said that it's hypocritical of British Columbia to talk about development of LNG while stopping the pipeline. Now we know there is a little difference between these two energy sources. Let's go back to the court decision that we started this program with. There is rumor, or actually from the news, that we know the NDP is going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. Will that halt the whole project and cause further damage to the development, to our economic development?
Well, first of all, I don't think the provincial government or the city of Burnaby are going to win these court cases, because interprovincial pipelines are very clearly a federal government responsibility, and the federal government has made the decision that this pipeline should proceed. But I think that I think that there's every indication that this is simply a tactic by the NDP government in Victoria to put roadblocks up in front of this particular project. To give some credit where credit's due, they have tried to expedite this court process. So by taking, they can jump over some of the lower court process in order to get a faster decision. So if they were simply trying to use these court cases as a stall tactic, which I think there is some element of that, they could have ground it through the court system so that it took more time. And
It
to
could
give them
take
credit,
years.
they seem to be maybe trying to push this forward in a way that will get a faster decision.
Thank you very much. This is a very complicated, complex issue, and your knowledge and your experience have helped us look at a bigger picture, so at least we know what the roadmaps are. Thank you very much, Mr. Hansen.
My pleasure.
周一長談今日時事話題，我哋今日到此為止，下一次見，我係黎伯佳，BC Lee，拜拜。